I want your warmth. Don't step from me tonight. Towering widow told him. Before we begin, comment your country so I know where the story is reaching. The wind moved like a slow sigh across the prairie, carrying the scent of dust, sagebrush, and something else, a quiet warning that a man's life was about to change. The hook came the moment Jonah Hale spotted her. The sun was dropping behind the ridge, painting the valley in copper light, when he noticed a silhouette standing on the edge of his dying pasture. Tall, still, almost carved from the evening itself. Jonah had been riding alone for years, so long that he'd come to expect nothing but empty land answering him back. But that night, the horizon offered him a woman built like a storm cloud held in human shape. She didn't flinch when his horse approached, didn't shift when his shadow crossed her boots. She simply lifted her chin, a towering widow in sun-worn clothes that clung to her powerful frame, and stared at him like she'd been waiting. Evening, Jonah said, voice low, rough, and used. Her reply was softer than expected. This land, you still claim it? Jonah cleared his throat. Far as I know. She held up an old envelope, edges curled, ink fading. Then you should also know someone sold me the 10 acres running along your creek. Jonah blinked. His father had dealt land in secret before drinking himself into grave, but this he hadn't seen coming. The widow stepped closer, firelight in her eyes. Name's Miriam Crow. Folks call me Mira. I don't want trouble, just a place to work and breathe. Jonah looked at her hands. Strong enough to break him in half. Lonely enough to understand him more than most. And for a man who'd been hollowed by years of silence, her presence felt like a frontier wind finally pushing against his chest. Over the next days, her camp rose on a ridge. Canvas tent lean-to, a fire that never quite died. Jonah told himself he wasn't watching, but he rode that way more often than any map could justify. He'd see her hauling lumber alone, shoulders gleaming with sweat, or kneeling by the creek with her black hair unbraiding in the wind. One evening, he found her sitting by her fire, steam rising from a pot, shadows dancing over her face. She looked up without surprise. You look half-starved, she murmured. He swallowed. I manage. Sit. Eat. There was no softness in her tone, but there was a kind of gravity that made refusing impossible. They ate in near silence, the quiet kind shared by two people who know hurt has no language. Jonah couldn't stop glancing at her, at the strength in her arms, the gentleness buried under that size, the grief hiding in the way she stirred her food too long. When he set his empty bowl aside, she finally looked at him fully. The firelight slid across her cheekbones, catching every unspoken ache between them. Her voice dropped to something he wasn't prepared for. I want your warmth. Don't step from me tonight. Jonah froze. Every memory of his late wife hit him at once. The grave on the hill, the night so quiet they scraped his ribs from the inside. Desire wasn't the danger here. Being alive again was. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Mira didn't move, didn't push. Just let the weight of her words hang between them like the slow pull of dusk. And Jonah felt it, his past tightening like a rope around his ribs. He stood, too fast. Her expression flickered, hurt cutting through her strength like a crack through stone. You're stepping back, she whispered. He didn't answer. Couldn't. He walked away from the fire, from her shadow, from the one thing that had stirred warmth in him for the first time in years. And he hated himself with every step. Jonah didn't sleep that night. The walls of his cabin felt tighter than usual, squeezing around like a memory he never asked to relive. The lantern flickered on the table, the flame bending each time the wind pushed against the old boards. He kept replaying her voice in his head, steady, low, unwavering. I want your warmth. Don't step from me tonight. He shouldn't have walked away. But when grief sits in a man's chest too long, it becomes a guard dog that bites even when someone reaches out with kindness. By dawn, he convinced himself he needed to apologize, or at least show her he wasn't running from her, but from the ghost that lived behind his ribs. He saddled up before the sun touched the ridge, riding toward her camp with the dust of regret behind him. But when he reached the slope, her tent was already gone, the fire pit cold. only a few boot prints left in the dirt, leading toward her new acreage. Mira Crow wasn't hiding. She was building. Jonah found her driving fence posts into hard earth, her body rising and falling with practiced force. Her clothing clung to her, worn tight along her shoulders, her upper chest bare to morning breeze, mid-belly exposed as she worked, sweat catching the sunlight in a way that made her look forged, not born. She didn't stop when she saw him, didn't speak, just kept hammering. Jonah cleared his throat. "About last night, keep your distance," she said without looking up. He flinched. Her words weren't sharp, they were tired. And tired hurts worse. Jonah stepped closer anyway. "Mira, I was rejecting you. You were afraid. I know." She lifted the post, drove it deeper with a heavy strike. "But I wasn't asking for your past. I was asking if you were still alive in your present." That landed harder than any blow. Jonah swallowed. "I didn't expect someone like you to see me that clearly." That earned him her eyes, dark, steady, unreadable. "I wasn't offering to fix your loneliness, Jonah. I was offering to share mine, so it wouldn't drown the both of us." He stepped closer. She didn't move, but the tension between them tightened like a drawn rope. "I thought you'd be angry," Jonah said quietly. Mira shook her head. "Anger's easy. Disappointment, that's the one that sticks." She dropped the hammer, wiped her hands on her clothes, and finally faced him fully. Her voice softened, but it didn't lose its weight. "You walked away like I was asking you to forget your dead wife. I wasn't. I know what graves ask of the living." Jonah's voice cracked. "Do you?" She nodded. "My husband Elijah was big enough to lift a horse by the haunches, but he couldn't outrun a broken beam in a collapsing barn." She exhaled slowly. "I buried him with these hands, and I carried the emptiness alone." Silence settled, heavy but shared. Jonah dared one step more. Close enough to feel her heat, not close enough to touch. "Mira, I don't want to run anymore." Her jaw tightened. "Words are wind, Jonah. Show me a man who stands his ground." He didn't hesitate this time. He closed a final distance, stopping just inches from her. Not touching. Just standing where she'd asked him to stand the night before. Her breath hitched barely, but he felt it. Jonah met her gaze. "I'm here, and I'm not stepping back again." For the first time since he'd met her, Mira looked unsure, like the ground beneath her shifted in a way she hadn't planned for. She whispered, "Why now?" "Because," Jonah said, voice low, steady, "I realized running from you felt worse than facing what scares me." The hammer of her heartbeat showed in the pulse at her neck. A long moment stretched. Then Mira broke eye contact, not to pull away, but to steady herself. "Don't make promises your fear can't keep," she murmured. Jonah nodded. "Then let me earn my way into your trust, one step at a time." The wind moved through the grass, softer this time, almost approving. For the first time, she didn't shut him out. And for the first time, he didn't run. If you are still here, hit like and subscribe so these long Wild West stories keep reaching you. Your support keeps this channel alive. The days that followed felt different. Not lighter, not easier, but shifted, like someone had opened a window in a house sealed up for years. Jonah found himself riding north each morning, not out of habit, but because something inside him pulled him there like a compass that had finally found its true direction. Mira didn't make it simple. She didn't soften, didn't flutter, didn't meet him halfway. What she did was let him show up. And for Jonah Hale, that alone was a miracle worth more than gold. One evening, a storm crawled in from the mountains, slow at first, then faster, swallowing the sky with rolling gray. Jonah saw the dark line forming and rode hard toward her ridge, not because she needed rescuing. Mira Crow could stare down God's own thunder, but because he didn't want her facing the night alone. He found her dragging planks toward the half-built cabin, wind lashing her hair across her face. Her clothes, tight, worn, clinging to her powerful form. whipped against the rising gusts, bare shoulders slick with the first drops of rain. "You came," she said, breath steady despite the storm. "Couldn't stay away," Jonah answered. They hurried to lumber under shelter, working in silence, bodies moving with an unspoken rhythm. But when the rain broke open and hammered the land, they ducked into her temporary lean-to, breathless, soaked through, standing close enough that the storm became a backdrop instead of barrier. Thunder rolled. Mira looked at him with the same fearless steadiness that had once driven him backward. "Last time you ran," she murmured. "Are you running now?" Jonah shook his head, water dripping from his hair. "Not from you. Not anymore." She studied him, eyes searching, deep, dark, unsure. For a woman who carried the world on her shoulders, vulnerability looked almost dangerous. "Why did you come tonight?" she whispered. "Because being near you hurt less than being without you," Jonah said, voice raw. "Because this land's too big for one heart alone. Because I'm tired of graves deciding how I live." For the first time, Myra's expression cracked, just slightly, but enough to show the woman beneath the strength. "You speak like a man who wants a future," she said quietly. "I do," he replied, "but only if you're in it." Lightning flashed, bright enough to silhouette her towering frame. She stepped closer, not aggressively, not claiming, just closing the distance he'd once feared. When she spoke, her voice had none of the heat from that first night. No command, no bold declaration, just truth. "I still want your warmth," she said softly, "but I want the man, not the shadow." Jonah didn't step back. He placed his hand, hesitant, shaking, against her waist. She inhaled sharply, not from surprise, but from the weight of being touched with care instead of hunger. Myra's hand rose to his cheek, rough palm cupping him with a gentleness she'd hidden for years. The storm raged around them, but inside that small shelter, everything felt still. "No stepping back," Jonah murmured. "Not tonight," she whispered. And there, surrounded by thunder and rain and the smell of soaked earth, two people who'd lost everything found the courage to lean into something new, not to replace the past, but to finally live beyond it. By the time the storm faded into a soft drizzle, Jonah and Mira stood at the opening of the shelter, watching dawn creep across the wet land. Her voice was low, but certain. "Tomorrow we build this house together." Jonah nodded. "And every day after, if you'll have me." She didn't smile, not fully, but the strongest people rarely do. Instead, she placed her hand over his. "Then stay," she said. "This time stay." And he did.